Here's that moment of truth. That moment of truth. My neighbor just started the vacuum. I don't know if you could hear the vacuum. You might not be able to hear it, but it totally just happened. My neighbor just started the vacuum. Let me just wait a little bit while we get live here and folks filter in. All right, we are good on the Rockfin. Are we good on the Twitter? It looks like we're coming through. Let me just make sure I have seen it and it is good. I have seen it and it is good. What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Happy Monday. It's good band, by the way. And we got a special Music Monday for you today, by the way. But happy Monday. Good afternoon to all my East Coasters. Good morning to all my West Coasters. My guest today is on the West Coast, like myself. And happy future if you're in the future. Well, good evening for everyone in the evening time zone. And of course, for everybody out in the future, New Zealand, Australia, you're a day ahead. You're in the future. Can you fix climate change for the rest of us? We're counting on you. You're in the future. No pressure. Anyway, hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Hope everyone is having an okay fall back. Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. Before I bring my guest in today, our friends over at ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules, and you can get their tea wholesale now because of the pandemic. Show them some love. Get some tea you like. And keep a lookout for that Ron tea. It's going to happen soon. Also, our friends over at triageoil.com, TRIGE oil.com. Trendy name, makes topical pain oil for your body and educates the public on cannabis-related issues. And, of course, our friends over at Indie Left. Indie Left is the only place to find all the articles and videos from all the content creators you know and love. They update the platform twice daily, so you can stay abreast on all the political news going on. I'm on there. A bunch of other creators you know and love are on there to find out more about everything they got going on and to join their Discord community. They're active over on the Discord. Check them out at independentleft.media. That's independentleft.media. And yours truly made their theme song. I always like to point that out. And if you want your own theme song for a Give What You Can level, patreon.com/Rob Lacone. Give What You Can level. Get all kinds of exclusive perks. One of them is I'll make you your own theme song. Whatever you want it to be about. All right, without further ado, my guest today, we got an awesome Music Monday plan because my guest today, he's been on this show before, and he's got a new album out, and I've already been listening to some of it, so we're going to be hearing him play some music live. We're also going to be listening to some stuff off the new album and some other collaborations he's done, so I'm so excited to have him back on the show. Please welcome back a Get Your News On with Ron favorite, Mr. David Rovics. What's up, David?
Great to be back, Ron. Thank you.
How has your spring ahead been? Has it been? I got thrown off a little bit, man. I mean, I'm a little loopy this morning. Even I got thrown off a little bit. I freaked out last night because my cat. It was actually like something out of a cartoon almost. My cat was just chilling on the couch with my wife and myself, and we're just watching something on the television, just a picture perfect, happy family on the couch. And all of a sudden, I just noticed, I'm like, wait a second, why isn't Lucy, that's my cat, I was like, why isn't Lucy hungry? She should be hungry. She's not hungry. Something is very, very wrong. She's just chilling, purring away, letting me pet her. And I'm thinking, something's not good. Something's bad. And then my wife just goes, Ron, it's an hour earlier. She's not hungry yet. It's not time yet in her mind. It's just so it throws me off a little bit, is what I'm saying. It throws me off a little bit. I don't know why we still do it.
It doesn't. I mean, here in Oregon, the politicians were trying to stop doing it, but you have to get congressional permission to stop doing it. So they voted in Oregon to stop doing it, but it's still happening. I mean, this way around, it's just been nice. I feel especially well rested because I've been getting an extra hour of sleep by accident for the past 2 nights. So I don't know. And of course, then the other way around, I just end up getting an hour less by accident. Which apparently causes a lot of car accidents around the country every year with all these extra sleepy drivers, which seems a little surprising for people who travel a lot and are used to jet lag. That 1 hour difference makes such a difference, but it does, according to studies, and it should be stopped. I think it was a stupid idea to begin with.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. And again, I know there's a lot of people who have very, very strong opinions on this. And I'm not one of those people. Like, I don't have to me, I don't understand why we still do it. I don't think the farmers need it anymore. At least that's my understanding. So to me, it just seems like something we shouldn't really bother with anymore. There's no really point to it. But some people have very strong opinions one way or another, and I'm not in their league. Like I'm just not in the like it's not a hill I'm willing to die on one way or another. To me, it
Hill
just
I'm
seems,
willing to die on. Yes, I
yeah,
always feel
it's
kind of
not
bad
even
for people that feel strongly about this particular thing.
David, it's not even a hill I'm willing to sleep on. It's not even a
No,
hill I'm willing to set an alarm for. I mean, I don't understand why we do it, but people have way stronger opinions than me, and they can hash it out. Like,
it's definitely a hill I'm willing to have a picnic on, though.
I'll have a picnic with you. Yeah, I mean, I'll have a picnic. We could talk about the hill. We can.
I'm happy to talk about the hill,
I got
as
one
long
more
as we don't
fun
have to
thing.
die on it.
You're
Mhm.
right. I got one more fun thing to tell you before we get into actual stuff I want to talk to you about in the album. There's a plaque to Joe Hill in my neighborhood, and I didn't know about it. I found out about it
Yeah.
recently. I
Oh,
didn't know
great.
about it. So Joe Hill,
1923 was, I guess that was after he died, but that was a big year in your neighborhood for IWW activity, I believe. But now I'm rusty on the details. I actually wrote a song about it for a musical play that never got produced, and then I lost it. But
really?
anyway, yeah.
I didn't know. So I live in San Pedro, California. For anyone
Yeah, San
tuning in who
Pedro.
may not, yeah. So I live in San Pedro in the Los Angeles area, and unbeknownst to me, it's a big harbor town, and it's a big. I mean, at one point, the LA waterfront was the busiest port in the world. I don't know if it still is the busiest in the world, but I'd imagine it's still up there. It's the LA waterfront, and that's in San Pedro where I live. So there were a lot of dock workers over the years, and Joe Hill was one of them. Joe Hill worked on the docks in San Pedro, and there is a plaque to him, and I didn't know about it. Somebody said it to me. They're like, "Did you know about this?" Now, a couple of the plaques were stolen last summer, over the summer in August. Some of the plaques were stolen. So I didn't know if the Joe Hill plaque was still there or not. I didn't even know. I'm like, I don't know if it's still there. And after a few emails of people just basically saying, Ron, this is a couple feet away from the farmer's market you go to every week. Can you please just go and look and find out if the Joe I would always forget, or I'd be, by the time I'd remember, I'd have all my vegetables with me, and I'm like, I don't want to be like looking for some plaque with all my vegetables with me. But finally, I just, someone even sent me the Google map where they sent like the farmer's market I go to where the plaque's supposed to be, and they're like, Rod, literally, you can just walk. It's like down the street. And I just decided, it's time. When people are sending me Google Maps of places where I live in and they don't even live there, and that's a sign that, come on, Rod, you got to just go do this. So I did, and the plaque is still there. And I took a video for the Rockfin Premium and patrons of the plaque that is still going strong in San Pedro.
I'm so glad to hear it's still there. I think actually those kinds of public plaques and public remembrances of certain key events and people can be so important, really, actually. And actually, I was talking recently with a guy who's working on a project to basically introduce the stumbling stones that they have in Germany to the United States. These stones in the ground that just tell people about certain particular horrific events that took place at that address, whether it was in the case of Germany, a deportation, or in the case of the United States, a lynching, or etc. Yeah.
Hmm. So I want to talk to you about this. You're probably already aware of this, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. The Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, they have a nation or a worldwide action today. It's happening today. And here's what they're saying. Help us demand that Spotify pay 1 cent per stream, open Spotify's books, and stop targeting artists with lawsuits. We will be delivering our demands to Spotify in a worldwide demonstration on March 15th. Now, here's some more details. We're going to go straight to their website here because it gives the details on all the cities involved. And for anyone who might not realize this, they're saying 1 cent per stream. You might kind of be doing a double take on that. But the reality is Spotify pays less than 1 cent per stream. They pay fractions of pennies for downloads. So here's what their website says. This is the Union of Musicians. Join us March 15th at 1 p.m. for our worldwide Justice at Spotify Day of Action. You can register below to get to the closest demonstration near you. Here's the cities in the U.S. Atlanta, Birmingham, Michigan. Birmingham, Michigan, I've never heard of. I don't know if they mean Alabama. That's like a town in Michigan. Boston, Mass, Chicago, Illinois, Dallas, Texas, Los Angeles. I've heard of it. Miami, Nashville, New York, San Francisco. And then around the world, we got Amsterdam, Antwerp, Berlin, Mexico, Denmark, Germany, couple places in Germany, London, baby, Madrid, Paris. I'm not going to read all of them, but Milano, Italy. Shout out to Milano. And of course, Toronto, Canada, Australia, all kinds of wonderful places. David, were you aware of this?
Yeah, I've been following it. I mean, I've been they're doing basically exactly what I have been wanting to do for years, and I started a sort of a well, it's basically I wouldn't call it a campaign. I just call it a website, davidrovics.com/penny, which is the penny campaign for streaming justice, which is what I called it, which is never really got off the ground as a sort of campaign, but just as a concept of the idea that I had, which is obviously an idea that lots of other people had, which is to take on Spotify, which is the dominant platform in music streaming for a variety of vulture capitalist reasons. And they take them on and try to demand that they pay a penny per play, just because that, as a beginning to a campaign, as an idea, that is a good place to start, where people can understand what you're asking for, and they can also understand how outrageous it is that they pay less than that. So I think what they're doing, this idea is fantastic, and I believe the list of cities that you've got there is basically a list of the cities where Spotify has an office. And I don't know what kind of, and unfortunately, Portland is not one of them. Otherwise, I would have signed up to be at the protest in Portland, but there isn't one. I think the nearest office to Portland is San Francisco, surprisingly enough. But the the one thing I have discovered with this union is, unfortunately, I mean, not to say anything negative about it, but I have been completely unable to get in touch with anybody at the union. Like, I mean, I got on their email list, and I follow them on Twitter, but you can't message them on Twitter, and I have been unable to get through to any organizers to interview them for my show.
Well,
And
some of the folks that are heavily involved is Max and John from Eve Six, and they've been on this show before. I'd be
oh,
happy to
good.
loop you in. Yeah, I'll loop
I'd
you in
love
with
to
them.
get in touch. I'd love to be in touch with anybody involved with the campaign to talk to them, but they don't answer their emails, so that's kind of unfortunate. Or maybe it's the NSA interfering with our emails, but I've emailed a couple times with gotten no response. But so I guess they are maybe getting too much too many emails from excited musicians who want to participate in the campaign to be able to respond to them all. I hope.
I hope so. Absolutely. I mean, it's really. I think it's great to see. I wish there was some sort of union activity. I was actually talking about this on the show yesterday, during my Patreon stream, where I was just wondering. I know at some point comedians tried, allegedly. This was before my time. But at some point, they tried for a comedians union. It just straight up sort of fell flat on its face. And I don't know if that's ever a type of thing we'd be able to organize. I wish it were a possibility, but I just don't know how something like that could be orchestrated in the stand-up world.
I mean, I could imagine how it could be organized, but basically somebody has to be paid to be doing that. I mean, that's the problem with these efforts, as with many other sort of smaller union efforts, whether it's around musicians organizing, like gig workers organizing of one kind or another, or whether it's around housing unions or things like that. Sometimes different unions like SEIU will fund an initiative, which is great, and it involves a full-time paid employee for a time, and then you'll hear a lot about that going on, whether it's a group like here in Oregon called We Are Oregon, which was very much involved with housing issues for some years, or any number of other initiatives, and then they die out when they stop getting the union funding because there's no longer a full-time employee, and as a volunteer operation, it just can't function. So I think that's one of the perennial problems, and I don't know if it's going to be a problem with this union initiative around Spotify. I hope that there is some musicians union in the world somewhere that has the brains to understand that even though Spotify, that organizing against Spotify is not going to do anything for the symphony musicians doing the soundtracks for the TV shows, which are the musicians that the unions actually care about. But it's not going to affect them, but it'll affect most of the musicians in the world who actually make a living as musicians or used to make a living as musicians. It'll affect us, but there's nothing in it for the musicians union, so they don't care because it's basically a mafia.
Right, you're saying the existing musicians
The
union,
existing old
not the
boys club
union.
of musicians. Not this one.
Right.
Not this one. I know nothing about this one. All I know is that they don't answer their email. So I question whether they have any full-time employees, and I question their sustainability in the future. But their idea of what they're doing is fantastic, and I hope that it can be sustainable, and I hope they can manage to start answering their emails, and I hope that they can do some real organizing, because they have a great website, but that's only the first step.
Sure. Well, and this is a nice first step too. Getting on Spotify for a little bit. Do you remember when the CEO at Spotify, great guy, do you remember when he issued that statement where he told all the musicians, "Hey, you don't think we're paying you fairly for your work? Make more music. Make more music for me to exploit." Do you remember that? How'd you feel?
I mean, it was just the most outrageous thing to say. It's like, it's like saying, I mean, it is exactly like the boss at a factory saying to all the workers who are making T-shirts and the sweatshop, you don't feel like you get paid enough. Make more T-shirts, as if they're not going to start paying less per T-shirt. When they start making more T-shirts, because it's not like each T-shirt sells a certain amount. Spotify, the whole equation is that you get your percentage of money based on how much music you have in the whole system and how much it's getting played. So it's some kind of bizarre, opaque equation, which interestingly on this very much related to this discussion, SoundCloud is launching a new streaming platform on April 1st, which is threatening to really sort of destabilize in very good ways the whole Spotify model, hopefully, because I mean SoundCloud is a known entity, and they're going to be launching a streaming platform that is based on the artists get paid based on the number of streams that artist gets, which seems like it obvious, but is not the way the streaming platforms work currently. They're skewed. The way they work currently with the agreements with the big three record companies is they're skewed towards giving their money to those companies, which neither benefits independent artists nor in many cases the legacy artists that we hear about making all this money. They're not all making that much money, actually. Some of these legacy artists from the 60s, their stuff gets streamed a lot on Spotify, but it's the big three companies that are sucking up all the money.
Well, and also, isn't there another side issue to all this, is that don't some of these big companies have the ability to kind of fudge the numbers?
Well, yeah, right. I mean, do we trust Spotify to tell us how much they're making, how much they're paying out? I mean, it's all just a big shell game anyway. How different, how much. I mean, it's the same bunch of venture capitalists, oligarchs from Russia, Norway, and New York who are invested in Spotify as who are invested in Apple and Microsoft and Facebook. I mean, it's just this idea that Spotify is losing money. I mean, it's nonsense. They're set up to lose money. They're a vulture capitalist entity set up to function only on constant Ponzi scheme investment in order so that when they grow big enough to destroy the industry that they're profiting from, then they can say, "Hey, we make the rules now. We're the only game in town," just like Amazon.
Yeah,
They're
well,
the
that's
same.
exactly. I mean, you just described Amazon's model to a T. We're going to
Yeah.
take a loss because we got the capital flowing in. So we're going to take a loss until we gobble up everybody else. Then we rule.
Yeah. And with every loss they take, that's another, untold numbers of musicians and artists of all kinds who are out of work.
Well, what do you think the fix for this is? I mean, do you think that I mean, obviously actions like this are a good step trying to get Spotify to compensate artists more fairly. Um, I think it's gonna take someone knocking them off their throne, so to speak. Like it's gonna take a real valid competitor, and maybe this SoundCloud thing will be that. I mean, maybe I don't know. And correct me if I'm wrong, but out of all these entities, it's kind of seems like the better ones are SoundCloud and Bandcamp as far as actually looking out for artists and being um a little better. Is that correct, or am I missing something?
I mean, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on these particular corporations, although I'm very familiar with the platforms. But as I understand it, Bandcamp and is a very much a for-profit corporation, and they make a lot of profit, and they make a lot more profit now that they have increased their percentage that they take on everything they're doing. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're operating on the model of profiting from your sales, kind of like So this is very different from the model that Spotify is operating on, because Spotify is, I mean, not Spotify, SoundCloud is operating on. SoundCloud is operating on the model of you pay for their service, and then they give you a service. So they're not actually planning on profiting any extra from this streaming platform they're setting up for their artists. So to be to be an artist on SoundCloud, to have a SoundCloud account for like unlimited, putting up your songs on SoundCloud, your material on SoundCloud, it costs somewhere, what is it, like $100 a year or so, right?
Right.
So, and many people might think, oh, that seems expensive, given that you can put up your videos on YouTube for free, and all this other platforms like Facebook, etc. But the difference is that SoundCloud is not taking your data and profiting from it. It's not that kind of entity. It's, I believe, even actually not even a for-profit corporation. I'm not sure. I think it's a non-profit. It's based in Germany. They're very conscious about data privacy, and they're not doing the whole Facebook, Spotify model. It's a very different model. So, it's yeah. I mean, I think actually it was Steve. What's this? Steve Wozniak, who said if Facebook were actually charging for their services, they'd be charging like $100 a month. And then, of course, nobody would be paying for them, so then they wouldn't be worth $100 a month. But, their model is to be free and then to make huge amounts of money off of what they could do with your data, and of course, they're one of the biggest corporations in the world. So clearly their model works. But
They should be
SoundCloud,
paying
it
us
operates,
$100 a month.
well,
That's
yeah.
that's what should be happening. They should be paying us $100 a month for all the data that they're getting.
Yeah, if they did that, then they'd be worth exactly about nothing, I guess. But that's what they should be worth.
They'd actually still make money. I think they could
Yeah,
they could give us a cut of it, and they'd still make
yeah,
plenty of money, and it would still be pretty unethical what they're doing. But at least
yeah,
we'd be in on the agreement a little bit. At least there'd
yeah.
be
They
that.
could give us $95 a month.
There you go. There you go. And then so real quick to just kind of reiterate it here. These are the actions going on today. You can learn more at unionofmusicians.org. That's unionofmusicians.org. Here's the cities where these actions are going on today: Atlanta, Birmingham. And by the way, some people in the chat were confirming, yes, they do mean Birmingham, Michigan, which is a town in Michigan. Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, Miami, Nashville, New York, San Francisco, Antwerp, Belgium, Berlin, Germany, Oslo, Norway, Paris, France, all kinds of places all over the world. And you can learn more about it at unionofmusicians.org. And it is going on today. David, let's talk the new album.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about it.
So it's a very pandemic kind of album. It started out in Oregon as a with bass, drums, and guitar, and then we sent all those tracks to Ireland for the rest of the treatment that Paul McAdam, an Irish musician and home studio producer engineer, lives, and he added tracks and mixed and mastered the whole thing, and it just came out last week on Bandcamp, and it'll be out on the streaming platforms such as the dreaded Spotify sometime in the next couple weeks.
Maybe you'll get compensated better as a result of this protest. So here it is. It's called Rebel Songs. You can find it on David's Bandcamp, which is davidrovics.bandcamp.com. And yeah, do you wanna play a track for us?
Sure. I mean, let's see. How do you do it? You can do that from there, or from the Bandcamp page there, or is that? I would say
I can play something off the Bandcamp.
Mhm.
You can also just play a song on guitar, whichever you want to do first. And yeah, however you want to do it, whatever order you want to do it in. I don't want to.
Well, either way, but if you want to hear what the album's like, then it's not going to be like me playing live. So either way, but I'm happy to do either. But if you play "Water on the Moon" from Bandcamp, then you'll get the most studio affected sort of track on there that I could never reproduce.
Sure.
Here.
Well, let's play it. We're not going to play the whole thing because of copyright issues, even though I could still get dinged, even though you're literally the owner and you're right here asking me to play it.
This one isn't even registered on BMI yet. So I guess
really?
I guess it's not only registered Creative Commons, but it's not registered anywhere else yet. So I guess you'd be safe.
So I might be safe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such an annoying thing with the whole copyright question, and I mean, yeah. Anyway, we could talk about that for an hour, but I mean, I'm all for artists making money off of their music, but the idea that should mean that you can't play one of my tracks in your podcast is completely backwards.
Well, that's the thing. I'm all about it too, and I think the protections are great and important. But when it's just sort of a robot picking up sounds and they have no nuance and they have no context, so they don't know the difference between somebody taking someone's music and just posting it and trying to make money off of it, which of course is wrong. Yeah. And the difference between that and somebody doing an interview with the frickin' artist.
I know, exactly. And
that's the problem. They don't differentiate.
Yeah, and we cannot have bots running our lives. So anti-social media bots that are controlling our communication, taking away our platforms if we say anything too socialist. I mean, people are getting their Twitter and Facebook accounts taken away all the time over the past few months. It's not just the right wing, it's the left wing all over the world. It's happening.
Absolutely. Well, hey, this is why it's time, and we talk about these issues on the show a lot because there's a lot of misinformation out there about like what policies we should be pursuing, and I think the overall fix is it's time for a real solid digital bill of rights. The solution is not to mess with Section 230, not to mess with things that have been pillars of free speech on the internet, but instead to add new policy that actually meets the moment in the form of a digital bill of rights. But anyway, all right, so let's play some of this song and then let's talk about it. So there's Water on the Moon. This is off the new album, Rebel Songs by David Rovics. And here's the one he wants us to play first. Boom.
The news isn't getting any brighter. The death toll isn't getting any lighter. There's a dark pall drifting overhead with so many more people dead. Turn on the computer or the TV. It's a world full of anger and death threats. What could happen if life could be supported somewhere else where things might be better sorted? A place where some could start anew, another way to say we're not through, despite all of the destruction, all the bad decisions made, all of the madness we could trade for a place more remote than primate or penguin has ever been. There's a discovery,
a silver lining for the cloud that has some folks singing out loud. There's water on the moon way up there. Maybe you and I should go live on a frozen lake without a care, looking down at the earth below. The cafes are all closed. You won't miss the sight of someone bringing to your table a flat white. We can still make espresso up there in our bubbles, breathing freshly manufactured air. When we go outside, we can jump so high. You speak into your mic, I'll hear your reply. We can look at the green earth, wish it well, from up in the place that makes the waves swell. There's water on the moon way up there. Maybe you and I should go live on a frozen lake without a care, looking down at the earth below. Up there, life is simple with just a couple distractions. Too few of us to form a faction. We all practice great lunar hygiene, all tested, cleared, and quarantined. Go back to visit now and again the planet we lived in way back when, before the satellites found H2O. And some of us said, fuck it, let's go. There's water on the moon way up there. Maybe you and I should go live on a frozen lake without a care, looking down at the earth below. There's water on the moon way up there. Maybe you and I should go live on a frozen lake without a care, looking down at the earth below. There's water on the moon.
It's a great tune.
Well, thank you.
It's a really cool tune, man. I like the vocal effects you got going on.
Isn't that cool? I love that, and his weird keyboard and that spacey kind of sound. I feel like I'm in outer space. I just love it.
That's the vibe. That's the vibe.
Yeah, he nailed it. I think that Star Trek kind of vibe. Yeah.
Elon Musk is gonna play that for his family when he builds his colony on Mars. He's gonna.
Well, if Elon likes the
song,
that's good. It's
hopefully,
okay if he likes it.
Well, that's fine if he likes it. I hope he pays you something pretty for it. If he's gonna use it in his soundtrack, he's got to compensate you well. That's what I think.
That's for sure. I'll definitely take some serious compensation for that.
So, what are some other highlights you want to talk? I mean, I've listened to a lot of this. I haven't listened to all of it yet, but I've listened to a lot of it, and like most of your stuff, it is very timely. It is very poignant. It is very topical. It mixes moments of not extreme, but very powerful sincerity, tear-jerking sincerity, but also a lot of moments of a lot of humor and tongue-in-cheek and kind of being able to laugh at at the world around us to keep us from going insane. So it's very much kind of what you've come to expect from a David Rovics album, I feel like, and I mean that in a good way.
Thank you. I'm very happy with it. And of course, it's also like, kind of partly happened because of the Oregon Employment Department, finally sending us money. But what I'm especially also excited about in terms of really timely stuff is just this track I sent you that this amazing punk rock band in Olympia just kind of sent me out of the blue. I mean, I just wrote a song last week called It's Been a Year on the 1-year anniversary of the first COVID case being found in Oregon. And then like 2 days later, I heard from this punk rock outfit from Olympia that sent me a karaoke track of the song I had just written, which was just amazing. And then I put vocals onto it, and then they mixed it down and made this track. So it's the first time I've ever had quite that experience of somebody just sending me an entirely well worked out karaoke track.
So here it is.
It's been a year since the virus arrived. A year since in this country 500,000 died. A year since all the borders were starting to be sealed. A year since the hospitals were sprouting in fields. No question for anyone living around here. It's been a year. It's been a year since the cafes all closed. Since the dates on the calendars froze. As the windows turned to plywood and the plywood turned to art. And unless you were essential or worked in a food cart, then you just had to cope with the anxiety and fear. It's been a year. It's been a year since the wheels in motion led to an uprising on each side of the ocean, exposed by the pandemic, by inequality. 846 of the neck beneath the knee. A time of counter demos for a while, a coup seemed near. It's been a year. It's been a year since canceling the rent. A year since the last of the money was spent. So many people saw we're all vectors for disease, and there is such a thing as society. Since the words mutual aid became ones you'll commonly hear, along with grim milestone. It's been a year. It's been a year. It's been a year. It's been a year.
That's it. What's that? I forgot that it did that. It just ends and then it goes on. That's part of the MP3 that they sent me, and I forgot how that got in there. I didn't actually even listen to that part.
That's like was that an outro, or was that like that
was either an outro or something. I you know what? I think that was an outro that I actually put up without even paying attention to it, because I thought the track was over.
It's great.
Somebody
man.
mentioned like, "What's that?" And then I was like, "What are you talking about?" Now I know what they're talking about. That's it. That's what they're talking about.
So you wrote this song. This band from Olympia got a hold of it, and they recorded that, sent it back to you. So you sang over it, and the result is what we just listened to.
Yeah, exactly.
So who is the band from Olympia?
They're called Virtual Bird.
Virtual Bird.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Virtual
and I had never
Bird,
heard of them. Yeah.
That's really cool. And they're right near you. Well, now you guys, once everything opens up, you all have to do some shows together. I mean, you're in Portland. They're in Olympia, which you're real close.
Definitely.
So now you all have to do shows together where you'll close with doing this song together.
That's absolutely the plan. Whenever that starts happening again, who knows? 2022, who knows?
Oh, geez. Yeah. It's almost too depressing to think about it. And I feel I try to be very conscious when I say things like that because I know that there are people who are suffering immensely right now, and obviously being housing and food insecure is much more significant than I really miss performing live. But it is, I mean, musicians, comedians, like it's not just how we make our livings; it's also a big part of who we are, and it's just gone right now. And it just, I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of comedians, especially, I mean comedians die very frequently, and that's something a
Yeah.
lot of people do know about, and it's not something that gets talked about all that often. But comedians die very frequently, and this past year, comics have been dropping like flies, and that's why. I mean, so many of them, it's like their sense of purpose is just gone for a lot of people, and just they kind of give up, and it's really heavy and tough. And so you really hope that it gets back soon and we can go safely. And I don't know when that's going to be. The optimist in me is saying fall, but I don't know.
I'm hoping for fall. I'm kind of very, very tentatively making some, not plans, but like, sort of more like feelers for plans for November, because the COP, the climate talks this year are happening in Scotland in November, and that's definitely part of my stomping grounds. So I'd love to get over there if that's going to be possible by then. But otherwise, who knows? I mean, maybe who knows what's going to happen? I've certainly anybody that's been trying to predict the future in the past year is not doing very well at that. So I wouldn't want to even try to predict past the next week, let alone into 2022. But I mean, one thing that's for sure about the past year is that it's been not only a health crisis and an economic crisis, but a major mental health crisis. And I mean, 65% of formerly employed or working artists in the United States are fully unemployed, as of the pandemic, according to Bill Dervisowitz, who wrote an article about it recently and wrote the book The Death of the Artist, which is a fantastic book about the state of the arts prior to the pandemic, where these corporations like Spotify and have largely strangled, basically, I mean, every form of the arts except for television, has largely been destroyed, to a large extent by vulture capitalist corporations. And even in television, the rate of pay is on average half of what it was 20 years ago, even though they're producing more programming than ever, right? But yeah, it's I don't know where I was just going with that.
No, it's fascinating because I mean, and I'm kind of just in it right now. I mean, everybody in LA is kind of wondering, well, what's going to happen when all this is over? Is it going to go back to quote
Yeah.
unquote normal? Which is not going to go back to quote unquote normal. There will be a new normal, but will LA still be LA? And I don't think anyone really knows for sure. I mean,
Right.
I think most people are speculating likely it will. Likely a lot of production is still going to happen in places like New York, LA, Atlanta to an extent, but nobody knows for sure. I mean, it's possible that as far as show business is concerned, LA could just be another city. Is that likely? No, I don't think it's likely, but I don't know for sure. I can't predict the future.
No, but I mean, one thing that does seem relatively certain is that if housing prices keep on rising, they've been the way they've been rising in places like LA and New York, which of course both were centers of a lot of different creative industries and are increasingly less and less centers because people are moving because they can't afford to live there. So, I mean, clearly, yeah, there's. I mean, I'm meeting. Almost literally every day I meet somebody who just moved here from LA, I mean, and they're like in the film business or advertising or whatever, usually something along those lines. And they've moved up here, not even to Portland, but to some far off suburb of Portland where they could actually afford to buy a house by selling the house that they had in LA or whatever their situation is. So it's often something like that. But they're moving here in droves, of course, because they can't afford there anymore. Which then, of course, means that those of us who are living here, which is actually the most rent burdened city in the country, according to the wages relative to rent, then we have to listen to folks from LA talking about how cheap it is here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, because it's like the other side of all that too is you have people, especially San Francisco is, I think, the most prime example in all this. San Francisco, they have a lot of these tech firms who have decided we're never going back to the office. Like, we're going to be remote from now on. Productivity has gone up. Our employees are happier because they're buying houses in other places. And the ones that want to stay, they're staying by choice. And we're just going to kind of keep it that way. So you're going to get this decent amount of space available. And, there's reasons to not be super optimistic that they're going to make the best out of it. But there is a chance, might be a small one, but still a chance that they could kind of reinvest in the city itself, that they could reinvest in affordable housing, that they could reinvest in just everything that at one point made San Francisco great, which is the creative class. They can kind of bring that stuff back. They have the chance to do that. Will it happen? I have no idea. I mean, there's reasons to be pessimistic towards something like that happening, but the way I see it, people got to try.
Yeah, people definitely have to try, and this is definitely a serious window of opportunity here, like we haven't had in many, many decades. And I think basically, the cat is out of the bag, or whatever stupid metaphor we want to use. I mean, basically, they by doing things like spending all this money to bail people out in so many ways, the Congress is setting a precedent. Like, this is what it's like to live in a country where the government actually cares about things like childhood poverty and housing discrimination and it's affordable housing. Whether unemployed gig workers can eat, and that this is what it's like to live in a country where they spend money on these things, because obviously they're too worried about the mass disorder that would result from an eviction tsunami of hungry people, all getting evicted from their Class C apartments across the country all at the same time. I mean, anybody in power anywhere can tell you can't tenably govern over a situation like that. So they are going to prevent those kinds of situations. They're going to try to spend their way out of the situation so that they're to avert a catastrophe. But what I'm afraid they're not going to do is change the basic structure of the society, which led to our society being as stratified and divided and homeless as it is, and that is, if that's going to change, it's going to require popular pressure, a popular movement to really push for not just temporary aid packages, but things, and not even just a living wage, but actual, real, practical, real rent control, real, actual affordable housing, not pretend affordable housing, not pretend rent control, but the kind of rent control that works, the kind that they practice all over Europe, the kind that actually works, not the stuff that's just on the papers that doesn't actually work, not the stuff that they do in California. That's not rent control. Real rent control. That's what we need.
You're absolutely right. And even beyond, rent control, living wages, and really what we're calling for is a complete shift in the status quo, because the status quo got us here. And,
Absolutely.
I mean,
But the danger about living wages is as soon as you have a living wage, it becomes not a living wage anymore. The danger about this that everybody needs to realize is that at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in New York City, the landlords were some of the biggest supporters of the labor movement. And that's because they made money off of it. because as soon as the workers started making living wages, they could pay more in rent, and the landlords charged more in rent, not for better housing, but for the same housing. And that's exactly what they've been doing in Silicon Valley, and that's why all the people who don't make six figures working for Silicon Valley got priced out of Silicon Valley. And of course, the same is true for anybody, not high up enough in the film industry to afford to live in, LA or somewhere, inner LA or wherever the preferable parts. I mean, it's the same kind of deal everywhere, and it's
well, I think people overlook and not, I mean, probably not the people who watch shows like this, but like in the big scheme of things, the collective I think people overlook how important and essential rent control is, and all these other things that are a reality in our world that we could have. Rent control is such an important proponent of that. I'm in favor of a UBI and a federal jobs guarantee because we can have both. So I say, why not have both?
Yeah.
But I also recognize how how useless those things would be without rent control. With rent control, they'll be life-changing. But without rent control, they're going to be rendered useless. They'll be a temporary Band-Aid at best for a little bit, and then they'll be rendered useless real quick. But with rent control, they could change the frickin' world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
but as it is with these big bailout packages, I mean, what we're talking about when we're talking about spending, hundreds of billions of dollars, partially to bail out landlords who have not been paid rent during the eviction moratorium because their tenants are generally busy paying for other things like food, or because their tenants, like me, are able to pay rent but are on, have been on rent strike in solidarity with all those who aren't able to pay rent because these landlords are charging usurious amounts anyway. So of course, when we had the opportunity to stop paying rent without getting evicted, a lot of people took that opportunity as a matter of principle. But I'm sure that most of the people not paying their rent are not paying because they can't, or because now that they don't have to because of the moratorium, they are prioritizing things like food and medicine. But what's going to happen when the moratorium ends? I mean, there's a lot of aid going, but the aid is going, of course, this is taxpayer money we're borrowing from our grandchildren in order to bail us out of this situation. And where is it going? It's going to landlords, so that we can stay housed, when they could just do something else like rent control or cancel the rent for the duration of the pandemic.
Cancel it and freeze it.
They could cancel it. They could freeze it. They could reduce it to 50%. They could bring it back to 1995 levels. I mean, they could do any number of things. And this exact practice has been done elsewhere. The idea of freezing the rent is a great idea, but it's already completely out of control. So in Berlin, what they actually did in some cases was by legislation, they brought it back to the level that it was at like 10, 15 years ago. And I don't remember the details, so don't quote me on that. In terms that wasn't done all over the city of Berlin, but there have been cases where municipal bodies have passed rent control legislation in Europe where they actually brought rent down back to previous levels.
Well, in places like that, and I'm not saying that Germany is some perfect utopia or anything like that. Of course, nowhere is. But in a place, especially a place like Berlin, and places like Denmark, there is more of an understanding that housing is a human right, and they do a lot better. They don't have this completely unprotected Wild West when it comes to housing like we have in the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, the difference between most European societies and here, but especially places like Scandinavia and Germany, I mean, it's very, very stark. And, anybody from Europe who doesn't agree with that has not spent much time in the United States.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah, when
no, I mean, and you'll run into anarchists and socialists in Europe who love to adhere to the completely mistaken notion that all capitalist societies are the same, and that's because they haven't traveled outside of Europe, obviously, because you can't maintain that illusion if you have actually left Europe at some point.
Sometimes when I'm having those conversations, I just say to some of those folks, I'm like, well, do you want to trade? Would you trade with me would you come? Would you swap with me? And then usually that ends it. Usually they're like, no, touche. Right. You win, Placone.
Yeah.
You got the worst oligarchy. You win. David, I appreciate you being so generous with your time and for hanging out, and it's always amazing to have you. And I was wondering if you would be willing to do a request for me to end the show today.
Of course. What's the request?
So this is on your new album, and this is one of my favorite songs, period, by you. It's one of my favorite David Rovics songs. It's such a powerful song, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to play it for us. It is about Julian Assange, and you've actually done it on this show before, and it is called Behind These Prison Walls. I know that my audience especially really appreciates that tune a lot. And I was wondering to kind of give a nod to the album, if you'd be willing to close the show today playing that song for us.
Oh, I would love to.
Thank you.
And incidentally, the engineer musician who plays with me from Ireland on the album, his two of his brothers have spent collectively, I think, like over 20 years in prison. So,
oh wow,
it's a very a theme that he relates to very personally.
It's an amazing track, and for anyone who doesn't remember, when David did this before, David at Belmarsh and tried to get in to see Julian Assange. Of course, he wasn't able to. It's a pretty extensive process to be able to try to do something like that. But he did write this song. You were outside the prison when you wrote this song. Is that correct? Or you were in London?
Yeah, I wrote it. I was near London, and I wrote the song, and then went to the prison and met up with a wonderful Danish, a couple of filmmakers, a Dane and an English woman, and they did a great film of me singing at the prison. I mean, really artistic. There's a wonderful video on YouTube of this. It's all really wonderfully mixed. I mean, at one point it looks like I'm gliding through the air. I mean, I don't know how they do these things, but yeah, really cool. And the prison makes a great backdrop, for better or for worse. Behind these prison walls, there's a man who's won awards for the work that he has done, and all that it affords, such as the knowledge of the hearts committed in our name. They can't stop the message, so the messenger gets blamed. Behind these prison walls, in solitary confinement, in a land of rolling hills and royalty and other such refinement, is someone who is a hero. Whistleblowers everywhere who help them tell the world of the crimes of Tony Blair. Behind these prison walls, you will find a mortal man. The reason why we know what happened in Afghanistan, when the soldiers of the empire, whose sun set long before, torturing civilians in their terror war. Behind these prison walls is a part of WikiLeaks, an eloquent orator, but you won't hear him speak. Locked away in silence, one who knows too well how those in power act when there's another war to sell. Behind these prison walls is one who stands accused of exactly what offenses the U.S. has refused to say precisely which, or to try to clear the mist, or to explain how he's not the same as other journalists.
behind these prison walls is a person they deprive of most of the things in life that keep us all alive. A person being tortured as we stand here now for revealing the war crimes. Why, when, where, how? Behind these prison walls, our very right to be informed of what the hell is going on is a teacup in this storm. With knowledge there is power, so the solution by the crown, a 24-hour-a-day indefinite lockdown behind these prison walls.
It's an amazing song, man. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, and thanks for playing it for us, guys. I think I can't think of a better way to end the show. You can't top that. So, guys, check out the new album, Rebel Songs. DavidRovics.bandcamp.com is where you can check out that album and check out the collaboration he did with the Olympia punk band Virtual Bird. The song is called "It's Been a Year." You can find that over on SoundCloud. So SoundCloud.com/DavidRovics. It's Been a Year. The song he does with Virtual Bird. You can find that on SoundCloud. And of course, you can get the album at DavidRovics.bandcamp.com. The album is Rebel Songs. It features that track, Behind These Prison Walls, as well as the other ones we listened to here. And it's a great band. I've listened to most of it. I'll listen to the rest of it today. And David, thank you so much for joining. It's always a pleasure. For everyone out there, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Is there anything else you wanted to plug, David, before we sign out here?
Well, actually, Ann Feeney, there will be an event on April 3rd. I think folks can find it on my Facebook page and elsewhere. Ann Feeney is a wonderful friend and songwriter who died a few weeks ago of COVID-19, and or I guess it was now a couple months ago, and there will be a remembrance event with breakout rooms for talking about her, as well as people singing songs about her, including me, on April 3rd.
Oh, where can people find out information about that?
I know it. I think on my Facebook page it says it's there as an event, and if people just do a search for Ann Feeney event April 3rd, it'll come up.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to try to be there. That sounds amazing.
Good.
Ann Feeney, I never got to meet her, but we are both from Pittsburgh. We're from the same town. Yeah.
Oh,
I grew up in Pittsburgh. Yeah. So I knew of her over the years. I never got to meet her, but yeah, I know a lot of folks who were very close to her, you being one of them. And yeah, she was an amazing folk singer, big activist, protester. She did a lot of amazing things in the city of Pittsburgh. And yeah, rest in power, Ann. So yeah, check out that event, folks. I'm gonna try to attend that myself because that sounds awesome. David, thank you so much. Again, everybody, DavidRovics.bandcamp.com. We'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy, she's on her cat tree dealing with the time zones, and she says meow, and I say peace. Peace.
Meow.